Well, it's such a pleasure to be here with my dear mentor of, we're just trying to count the years, 13,
about
14
13
years throughout my career. And it's so great to be here sharing with you really the practical how-tos in terms of how to make mentoring work. As you can see with the setting, we want to keep it fairly informal. Mainly, we want to have a dialogue with you about what worked, what didn't work, so that you can actually leave today and really through the Let's Go theme, just go and do it. So we're just going to have a conversation. I'll be the part moderator asking Christine questions, and I'll be answering some of my own questions, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So what we thought we would start with is to just share with you what is the impact of having mentors in our careers. Would you want to start, Christine?
Yep. Thanks, Vivian. So we thought it would be fun to actually share our story of mentoring with each other and then our own personal experiences. So for me, I mean, being about 10 years older than Vivian, I grew up in a slightly different work environment than I think that she has. And I really did have very few female role models growing up in my professional career. It really was men at the top, men at the board. And so I found traditional mentoring wasn't really working for me. It wasn't getting me everything that I needed. So I had to find and adapt my own strategy about how I was going to create and build my career, my life, things that were important to me. And eventually what I realized was I kind of created what I call a boulder and a pebble network for myself of mentoring. So I had people that I admired in certain categories of my life and used them as the go-to for certain things. And some people became boulders. Like I would describe myself as a boulder for Vivian, meaning that I'm one of her rocks and I'm probably a big mentor to her. But I also have people who have influenced me or who I've admired or who I've taken traits from or I've gone to for go-to advice on certain like smaller topics, or I've created groups of women who maybe support me as working mothers, and another group that maybe something more on my professional side, like joining a CEO forum. And so by creating a network effect to mentor everything that I need mentoring in and creating for myself a plan of what I need development and mentorship in, I've been able to effectively use mentoring to build my career at different stages. And so we'll talk a little bit more in detail what some of those look like as we go through the conversation.
As for me, I grew up in Asia, and for a very long time, I had a confidence crisis. And I would say really helping me develop the confidence in my career is what mentors give to me most in two ways. One, when I'm about to make a key career decision or really doubting where I'm at and wondering what I should do, having this network of mentors to reach out to give me different perspectives and open up horizons and challenge me on my thinking really gives me the confidence in my decisions. Now, you never know whether it is the right decision, but it gives me the confidence and lifts a lot of weight off my shoulder. But secondly, I think perhaps more importantly, having mentors who are not only successful in their professional lives, but also have very fulfilling personal lives, and Christine is a great example of that, and have them share stories and the challenges and the decisions that they've made and how they have impacted their career, really humanizes highly successful leaders and CEOs, and it gives me this little voice in my head that says, they're kind of like you too. So it allows me to aspire to higher levels of performance and success, and that is a really great gift of my mentors. So Christine, I'm wondering, excuse me, of all the years that people have come to you for mentoring advice, what are some of the questions that come up most often, and are there nuggets of advice you can share with us today?
Definitely there are themes, and I think one of the first themes is work-life balance, which I know is really important. I'm a mother of three. I was working when I had each one of my children, and I took varying different lengths of maternity leaves. I couldn't go back at 6 weeks when my first son was born. You just can't look at that baby. I found that very tough, so I ended up staying out of the workforce for about 8 months and then went back, which didn't end up being really an issue for me because that's when I went to work for Howard Schultz and I did his first private placement offering, and I wouldn't have had actually that opportunity if I hadn't taken the time off. And then when my daughter was born, there was, again, no maternity leave, so I got the 6 weeks medical leave, but then Starbucks gave me part-time work, and they used to deliver the route truck by my house and drop off the work. And then, so when it delivered coffee to the store that was nearest to my house, they would come to my house and drop off the work and then come back and pick it up the next day. So, and then I would just do it at night. And so, you know, finding creative ways to solve problems. And then with my last child, I did take 6 months off, and that had some challenges. So what I committed to in mentoring was being really honest about what it's like to be a working mother. I breastfed all of my children until they were 14, 15 months old. So I held sessions with young women at the office about being first-time breastfeeding mothers, and how do you do that, and doing work, and what does it take. And so you have to be really vulnerable and share what's going on when you kind of commit to be in that relationship with a bunch of young women at the office. And so if you're not willing to be vulnerable and share the stories about what it takes to get through daycare, what it takes to manage you know, relationships with your working spouse. And you know, so my husband went to work really early in the morning, which meant I had get kids ready duty. And then he got home and had afternoon and get dinner ready duty, and I came home at 6:30. So finding ways to really do work-life balance and practical solutions, how to be there, managing your calendar, taking every bit of your vacation every day, and getting in real conversations and practical solutions as a mentor in work-life balance. And it's not the same solution for everybody, and letting people know that's okay. Because the number one piece of advice on work balance I give people is live into what works for you and your life, not the expectations of others. Because if you live into the expectations of others, you will never be good enough, and you'll never actually be happy. So it has to be what's working for you and your family. And so just being able to be really in the honest conversation and not expect people to do it the same way I did, but being real about what the impact of it is at work. So work-life balance is one. And then how to work with men is another one that, you know, at the top, and how do you hold your own space, and having enough courage. And not be a man. I'm really proud of, you know, one senior executive said to me one time, he said, "You're the first woman I've worked with who's really powerful in the workspace, and you're still a woman." And, you know, it was kind of a backhanded compliment, but but what he was saying was he was leaving room. He saw that it could all be done, and that I didn't have to do it the same way. And what he did was then create space for me to do that more. And bring you know, who I was into the office space, and creating that type of relationship was really important. And so that's another big topic that I've mentored on. And then how you plan your career is the other really big topic that comes up, or the three themes.
So research has repeatedly shown that women report having a harder time finding mentors, and that this is a significant factor in women being held back in their career, and perhaps the pay as well. Why do you think that is, and what can we all do about it?
I think it goes back to my opening comments, is I think sometimes we expect a mentor to be everything for us. And then it's that time and or those expectations, and we aren't also clear what we're expecting of ourselves. And so that's where, like, I create my own mentor plan for myself about what is it I need development in, and I take that feedback from my 360s. I look at where I'm trying to go in my career, feedback from my board, and say, all right, so this is what I need to know or have a mentor in to grow my business, to grow myself. And then I look for that support system, and not one person who's going to solve all those things for me. And then I own what I have to own myself in terms of being honest about, you know, what skills I need. And sometimes that's a course or a class. Sometimes it's like joining the CEO forum, or it's, you know, going to, you know, some conventions, or finding mentors who have different experiences than me and getting into conversation with them. So I think it's that plan, and then it's realizing it's a group. And if you're only looking for one person, it's really hard to find that one person and to click with that one person for everything that you might need. So it's taking mentorship apart. Yes, there's a formal process in some companies, and or a formal relationship you can create, but looking in places like your, you know, if you're young, your parents' friends are a great source, who might have that time and an interest in you as a person, and that relationship that might be comfortable. So looking in non-traditional places outside of the workplace, I think, is a great solution for that.
And I think the thing that you said about developing a network, and it's the boulders and the other mentors that supplement, it's perhaps counter to
Yeah.
kind of the preached approach, perhaps,
Yeah.
that it is not this formal one or two people that you go to regularly for meetings and checkpoints. It's really a network of conversation that you're managing to help.
Exactly, and I might have the more formal process with the more formal kind of what I'd call my bolder person about my career development, and I certainly have a formal process on how I manage myself. But where it's informal, I mean, there's go-to people. You know, I call them, we call ourselves the leading ladies. It's a group of executives, and they're a set of girlfriends that I've collected over the years that have been my peers, and we've all moved into positions. So we get together two or three times a year, and you know, sometimes we'll golf or spa, or, you know, we'll do whatever, and usually wine's involved, and we just talk about our lives and what our experiences are and what we've learned. And, you know, they're the ones that I can call, and, you know, they're my complaint hotline. And, you know, so when I actually, you know, just need to vent and or talk about something, they have the ears and they'll listen to me. And then they know me really well through all the years. So they'll look at me and go, and you know you're contributing to this, bye. And so they'll have that honesty and that conversation with me. And it's totally safe because it's not work related. It's about my emotional health as a leader. And you've got to have emotional health as a leader, just like you've got to have intellectual health, and you've got to stimulate yourself by learning and growing all the time.
When we were preparing for this conversation, I was so struck by how similarly we structured our mentoring network. As you said, there are several senior, experienced, successful women who are the boulders of my network. And I also call on my sister, who is 7 years older, and she's always a step ahead of me in whether it's her personal life or career development. And then I also have a group of 7 women, and we call ourselves Age Sumatra, because we met each other at Starbucks, but we're all now doing different things. But this is a social group, and at the same time, we are all at about the same stage in our career development. We all have young children, and we're just wrestling with the same stuff. And we meet about every other month, and a lot of that is social, but we also really talk about our lives and key decisions. And very importantly, it also tells me I'm not alone. Like, everybody goes through this, and that is so powerful. If you just take a moment and look around here at the friends that you make here and at school, they are going to be great sources of mentorship. 10 years from now, those are the people that you will pick up the phone and ask them, you know, and you know, about a situation that you're thinking through.
And sometimes we don't think about mentors for our marriage too, right? So I have a group of college girlfriends who we all married our college sweethearts, and we're all still with them. And we still get together once a year and go do stuff. And they're my complaint about my marriage friends and relationship friends, and because they know me and they know us. And so having that group of friends about, you know, mentor every aspect of your life, right? So, you know, that girlfriends with the kids, the girlfriends with your career. So we forget to mentor all parts of who we are. And if you're not doing that, that's where you're gonna fall off the track in your life.
So if we're all gonna develop mentoring networks, and that the definition of where we can go find a mentor can be so broad, how do we know it's a good match?
So, you know, for me, the things that I've always looked for in a mentor are, you know, the great listeners, and but the people who are subject matter experts in what it is that I know that I need, and the people who will be really honest with me, but also care about me, have my back, and see my potential. And, you know, if that person doesn't see your potential and they don't see your struggle as the journey to get there, you know, they're performance managing you in mentorship as opposed to truly helping you see the consequences or the opportunities and the choices that you're making. And so you're not looking for a performance manager, and so that's why sometimes your direct boss isn't your best mentor. Former bosses can be a great mentor. And collecting your former bosses as part of that network is really important. But the right match comes down to the person who really sees you for who you are and is willing to engage in a discussion and a dialogue with you and not actually tell you what to do. Because if you're not owning and taking that relationship and the responsibility for your decisions, you're looking for someone else to do it. And the second thing is finding the right person for the right thing, which we've already talked about. And the third is being respectful of the relationship on both sides. So, this isn't like, a mentor isn't like your needy best friend relationship. If you're on the phone with them all the time, if you're going in complaining about the same problem all the time, and you're not actually taking any action, you're not actually being the right mentee for the mentor either. And I think it's also situational appropriate. You don't want to have, the hardest things for me to say no to is like when a really bright store manager will call me up and say, will you be my mentor? That's not really an effective use of my time as an executive. Now, I might do that for somebody's friend, or like a friend's child or daughter, or somebody that I'm mentoring in that career world, but I can't take on, 700 store managers. I mean, that's not realistic. So when you ask in that mentor relationship, and I'm not, I want to be a CEO, okay, but first you have to be this, and then this, and then this. So get a mentor that's closest to that next step, and then work the next one and the next one. And then that's how, and then you can, go to seminars or things like this where you can hear people like me talk.
Yeah, so you might be thinking, if you have identified people, especially people that you think might make good mentor candidates, but you don't know them, how do you go about reaching out to them? And I don't have a full strategy for you, but I have an example to share. Back in the day when I was a junior manager, I think I was fairly new at Starbucks, moved to Seattle, and I attended a speech by Professor Myra Hart. I think she just finished some research in terms of where HBS women kind of landed in their professional lives, how many were working full-time, part-time, and not working, and she discussed some of the drivers behind the drainage from the workforce of professional women, if you will. And I was so moved by her talk that I went back to Starbucks, turned on my computer, and I started writing kind of my thoughts out in terms of what I felt Starbucks was doing a really great job of, having on-site childcare and nursing rooms and all that kind of stuff, but also some of the areas that we can continue to improve on. And seriously, without thinking it through too much, I sent it to a number of senior VP women whom I kind of know from a project basis. I presented to them, but I actually didn't have a personal connection to. Just send it out and see what happened. And what happened next was pretty interesting. Some of them started to get back to me with their thoughts and their thinking, and others didn't. But with those that did, they started to share what their thoughts were on that topic, but that also shed some light in terms of their values. And also it tells me who felt personally connected to me enough to actually get back to my email. And so through that, I started reaching out to people whom I felt would be open to a conversation and have coffee. And I fully agree with you, Christine. I never set a meeting and ask, would you be my mentor? It's just awkward. It's almost like you meet somebody and you ask them, would you be my friend? You wouldn't do that, right? Maybe when you're 7, but you don't do that. And you kind of grow into a relationship. You have this first coffee, you talk about things, and I think very quickly both sides would realize whether that conversation was helpful and whether they want more coffees, and then you develop into a mentoring relationship that way.
Absolutely, and I mean, as an executive, how do you create space for mentoring? So I would usually be there a little bit later in the evenings, and so I would leave that time open for women inside and outside my department, or really anybody who wanted to come in to have those conversations. And then if it clicked, it clicked. And then also, as somebody who is a mentor, sometimes I have to look at the person and say, you can't come back. And I've had to have a situation where I did have a kind of a stalker mentee, and it was somebody who came in all the time, who really just wanted to show me PowerPoints of their work, and it was really, they didn't want to mentor, they wanted to be promoted. And so their motivation wasn't actually to have a conversation. It was about opportunity to get visibility and looking good, and they were in a different conversation than I was. And so I had to be really honest with them and say, I don't want to be a part of this. You're wasting my time. And because you're not taking any advice, you really don't want any advice. You just want me to champion your promotion, and this is about visibility and looking good. And I don't have time to look at other decks. So, so you, as a mentor, I think sometimes you have to draw the lines about what it is that you're willing to participate in and be in the honest conversation.
So what do you look for in a mentee when they come to you, and what type of conversation and what type of prep work would you be looking to them for?
So what I'm looking for is somebody who I see their potential, and certainly that was what I saw with Vivian, and as someone who that spending the time with you And because, you know, I could, you were so smart and still are so smart, and, you know, really could work across the organization. And so I knew my time with Vivian, not only professionally for the company, was worth it, but also, you know, as struggling with balancing your personal life and your confidence. And I knew that I had gifts that I could give Vivian in those things, and she wanted them. So there was a listening, there was a respect. She didn't come in asking me to make all her decisions for her. She wanted a conversation about what was the impact of this, what was the choice of that. So I wasn't being her mother. You know, I think that's an important distinction. I was being a mentor. And I was saying, all right, so think about this. If you have these career choices in front of you, if it's line and it's staff, are you learning strategy? Are you working for somebody who you respect and admire, who's going to take your career to the next step? Are you working in a place that you'll have more visibility and reach across the organization? So actually having conversations about you know, her job and her career, and so that she could make the right choices for herself. And my satisfaction was she was being developed as a resource for the company, but I also saw her reaching her human potential in the organization and as a person. And so, you know, so that was immensely satisfying for me. And it wasn't that I was telling her what to do, but I knew she was living her best life. So that's the type of relationship that I'm always looking for when I can mentor someone. And are they ready and open to feedback and advice? And so, you know, Vivian was at one point, you know, looking at 2 different lines of something, and I had to give Vivian, I was like, all right, so if you go do that job, here's what I see as your strengths. Here's where this is going to be potentially hard for you. Are you ready to step into this for yourself? Are you ready to take this on and develop this skill in yourself? Because if you're not, then this is going to be tough. And so she valued that advice as much as and you did this great. You know, so it wasn't just like the good news. It was really about, is this right for you? And here's some of the things I see in you. And Vivian really valued that. So they're coachable. That's something else that I look for.
I just want to touch on how we organize these conversations too, because you pointed out respecting the mentor's time, and I think that is so critical, because the moment you turn into a liability, you just kind of lost that personal relationship. And when I was working with Christine, whether working directly for her or not, a lot of times I just kind of sneak in time with her, you know, one-on-one, and it's really about, you know, business issues or whatnot. Christine is always open and usually start the meeting by asking me, how are you doing? Like, how are you doing? And 9 times out of 10, I would be like, doing great. I have 3 things to talk to you about today. 1, 2, 3. But it's kind of a funny story. When we were meeting to talk about what we're going to talk about today, we scheduled a meeting for this, and I walked into your office, and you asked me the question, how are you feeling? And at that point, I suddenly felt that, you know, I have stuff here that I actually need to talk about, and that was the best 20 minutes of mentoring that I got from you. And then we got right back to what we want to talk about. So I think it's just the informal setting to have a real conversation about stuff that you really need to talk about. And I value quality over quantity for sure. Like, I really look for the light bulbs, the big inspiration, and it doesn't happen every month. It won't happen every month. And so it's really leveraging the mentor's time and knowing what you're asking and thinking through it, and then getting the advice is how I'd like to structure those sessions.
Absolutely, and I think the other times too, like, and sometimes if it's a more formal career conversation, then there's definitely more structure that I would put at those conversations, which are like, well, let's put out the building blocks of what you need to be a CEO, what ones have you covered off, and you know, how much time. So that would be a more structured conversation, which is about career management. But if it's about managing change or transition in the organization, or relationships with peers, or things that are causing stress, then that's more the kind of EQ kind of questions, and then giving the room and the space to talk about strategies for coping with those issues.
So lastly, what I thought we would share with the group is the best advice that you've gotten from your mentor in your career.
I think there's 2 pieces of advice I value highly. And the first was when someone said to me, because, you know, I was, you know, a very responsible leader, and I would make sure everybody was set up for success, including my peers. But I wouldn't always take the credit or put myself up front, or like lead the presentation. And so I had a very wise gentleman pull me into his offer. He was a golfer. So his analogy for me was, wouldn't it be a shame if the best golfer ended up being the best caddy? And so he was telling me I was carrying everybody else's sticks. And he said, get up on that stage, take the credit, lead. And if you don't do that, you're going to become a servant leader. You will be the B player. And you'll be the right hand to everybody else, and you're capable of more than that. So sign up for the, and he swore a little bit, tournament. And he was right. I was using all the things that all the books told you to do, which was be a servant leader and take care of other people. But those are written probably for men, not for us women who actually need to be the hero leaders and what we need to step into. So I was, following all the class book, servant leader stuff, but they forget to tell you to be the hero sometimes. So that was one piece I value highly. And then the second piece of advice was I was always a utility player because I could build departments and do things, and so I always did what was needed. But I didn't always do what I wanted to do. And so that was the second somebody called me on that and said, when are you going to do what you want to do instead of what people need you to do? And owning my own career and standing for that. And I realized in a lot of areas in life, we don't actually talk about what we need. Or I didn't, and or what I wanted. I would maybe talk into what was wrong or what was a complaint, and that was really a powerful lesson for me to speak into what was needed and what I wanted, and then to take action on that versus being in either complaint or hanging back. So leading myself in those conversations and declaring, and I think that relates a little bit to Sharp Sanders leaning in and being a stand for yourself.
As for me, I'm going to share some advice that you gave to me 8 years ago. And the setting was that I was 8.5 months pregnant. I was international strategy director at Starbucks at that point. I was traveling all the time. I was wondering, what should I do about myself? I probably wouldn't want to travel internationally, but I am really good at my job. Do I even want to come back full-time? Should I ask for part-time? Or should I just leave the workforce for a couple of years? In general, I was just freaked out and leveled up by the hormones while I was pregnant. And I went into Christine's office and I was like, oh, you have young children, how do you manage it? I just threw a kind of broad question at you. And what she shared with me, I live by every day. And she asked me to take a long view of my career, a very long view. And she said that life is like a river, and that as long as you're heading in the same general direction, you will likely end up in the same place, right? So you might choose this path or you might choose that path, but as long as you're heading in the general direction, you will meet. And the meaning behind that is you can choose a slightly different path and go somewhere else and continue on a similar trajectory and get to where you need to be. And for me, coming from a kind of history of thinking that in every point in my life, I must make the best decision and performing at my best so that I can get on the next trajectory, that was a huge insight to me. And it means that I don't have to power through what doesn't work in my personal life. And so coming out of that meeting, I started reaching out to other senior leaders and created a role as product strategy director, and allowed me to learn about a completely new facet of the business, which is a core driving engine as well. And then I ended up in the same place. Like, had I powered through and stayed at Starbucks and did all those things, I probably would have ended up at Lululemon as head of strategy. So that really tells me that at any point in time, you have to think about what is important for you and make the best decision for you at that point, and trust that with your talents, you are going to get to the same place. And that just lifted a huge load off my shoulder because I don't have to doubt myself. Again, I have like a confidence thing, but I didn't doubt myself anymore. And for sure, I love what I'm doing now, and I'm very happy. So,
and that advice came from regrets I had. Whereas I saw that if you didn't go straight up every mountain, you somehow weren't winning. And what I didn't realize is that there were switchbacks right next to those straight up cliffs that I was going up. And and when you go straight up every cliff after time after time after time, it's like, yeah, you find it pretty powerful and everything else. But when I watched somebody else, I had a really good peer, Lonnie, who she did the switchbacks, and she ended up the same place I did, and she looked a lot fresher than I did. I was like, I realized in that eddies help you get ready for the rapids. And knowing where you are in your personal life, about when it's time to go straight up or go through the rapids, and when it's time to come over a little bit, but nothing changes in your potential.
Talent always wins. As a leader, I look for great people who contribute. I don't, it's like, back in your career, does it matter that you took 6 months off? What I see is who you are now and what you're contributing, and are you the right person for this job and this talent? So don't be afraid to take that long view and take an edit every once in a while to get ready. What you're protecting is your performance. What I didn't protect all the time was my performance. So, I took the big hard challenges all the time, and I stumbled and I fell and got back up. But it sure would have been a lot easier if I'd seen the switchbacks.
Yep. So that's all we plan to share with the group. Why don't we open it up for Q&A?
So how I would see that, and I think earlier we heard a little bit about this, but how I look at it, developing like sponsors is when you're managing your career inside an organization. You can't have a relationship with just your boss or your boss's boss. The people who make the decisions about who's going to be promoted are the whole senior management team. So you have to treat every like department or cross-functional team that you're working with is actually you're impressing that other team on what you can contribute and who you are. So sponsors are people in the organization that are sponsoring your career, and you are people who you want to say, wow, she's great to work with, I want her on my team, and who are going to be influencers in your career. And a mentor, as we talked about earlier, can be a mentor for any attribute of your life that you're trying to work on or improve, whether it's your personal relationship, time with your girlfriends, or your career, or a formal group. So I think mentors to me is a broader, and I would use sponsor to talk about people who are sponsoring your career within an organization, whether it's the one you work for or something that you contribute to.
Yeah, I agree. Sponsors are for professional development. Mentors are for happiness.
Good morning, my name is Mary. So as humans, we naturally gravitate toward people who are like us. So a lot of times mentors are women, but I think it's really important to also have male mentors. Can you talk about how you can be overcame that feeling of discomfort going with someone who's different than you were, and how it helped your career, and if there's any differences between male mentors and female mentors?
I actually, when I built my mentor, I would see my husband as a mentor. And to me, it is really looking at the specific individual and how they contribute to how you make decisions in your lives. And it's not about a ratio or how you overcome. I think the same way that if you have a personal connection with a male, it's the same thing, right? You reach out for coffee, you get their advice, and I know, Christine, you have a number of male mentors in your life. To me, it's the same thing. It's really looking at the individual and your own development plan and your goals, and who might be advisors for all those things that you're thinking about.
Yeah, where I learned my 6:30 mentor meeting time, as I kind of called it, was from Orrin Smith, because he made that time available for me. And he was a great mentor to me in teaching me company strategy and organizational development and just general how you run a business. I think he was one of the best in the world. But I used Howard Behar at Starbucks as the best mentor in the world about people leadership and management. And and Howard Schultz for vision. So recognizing what each of their talents was and going to them. So I wouldn't have gone to Howard Schultz and talked about child stuff. I mean, that just wouldn't have worked. Because it wasn't our connection point. But if I went in and talked to him about creating something new or cultural values or whatever, so it's kind of knowing what you're going to talk to that guy about. Now I could talk about marriage and all that other kind of stuff with Howard Behar, and that was fine. So it's really what are you asking those mentors to be for you, and finding the appropriate level of conversation. So it's no different with men than it is with women.
Yeah, there's one here.
Hi, my name is Paulina. I'm hearing that mentor is a two-way street. Can you maybe share if you learned something from one of the mentees and how that affects your decision, life decision?
mentoring Vivian, I got to see what it was in myself, you know, in my story, and sometimes you actually can just let go of some stuff too. After you've healed it with someone else is sometimes the best healing for yourself. Or insights in thinking about it when you're mentoring. It's just like teaching. When you teach something, you actually learn it more. And so I think then being able to crystallize those lessons in my own mind was really important. And sometimes the challenges or the reframing from the way that Vivian would come in and ask questions was also insightful. And also sometimes what did we need to change as leaders? And so, you know, how do we need to make it easier? You know, so things like having core meetings between 9 and 3 so people can deal with family and personal life. And finding flexible solutions about how we can make it easier for people with long commutes, et cetera. So as an organization, mentoring is also an opportunity to find out what's causing the tension. And sometimes it can be peer relationships. And so, you know, one of the things that we did at Lululemon was we created a leadership development program we called Leading Others. And it wasn't about leading the people, you know, that reported to you. It was actually about leading peers. And that helped us with coaches and projects and teams. We were able to create a program that helped people work cross-functionally and work on peer relationships. Because a lot of the things I was hearing in the mentor relationships was about that conflict, and people didn't know how to do that well enough in our organization.
Yeah, and to me, I talked about the mentoring group I had, and a lot of times I find myself giving advice that I should be giving myself. So let's say a girlfriend took a few years out of the workforce and want to take this big job that she's been offered. And I would tell her, you're great, you have the confidence, you can make it work. And then I think back to my doubts about myself, and I think just by saying it and in a group setting, that's the power of mentoring. It's really, talking it out, but also making us more aware of how we make decisions ourselves.
We'll have time for one more question, so we'll have our question before we wrap up. Hi, I'm Summer, and my question deviates a bit away from the mentoring aspect. You mentioned that a lot of the advice you felt you read was geared towards men and didn't necessarily apply to you as a woman. And I was wondering if you could offer some more advice that is specific to women to achieve success in the workplace.
Yeah, number one piece of advice would be get in there and run the business, right? So if you want to be a CEO, people are looking that you have 10 or 15 years of running P&Ls, whether it's through like brand marketing side P&Ls or operating side P&Ls of the business. And so getting in there early, or you do that manage people, and then you can rotate through staff and strategy jobs, but make sure you're always going back to that P&L and taking that opportunity and seeing yourself as being capable of that. The second thing is not being afraid to get on that stage to lead the meetings, lead the band, whatever, and taking credit for your work. So while it is important to be a servant leader and create the space for others to perform, there is a hero aspect to leadership that we have to get comfortable with. And so, it's wearing that with confidence and being okay with that and taking up a little center stage space. And then learning how to do public speaking is really important because that's part of being visible in an organization. So as much as you dread it, signing up for being on those panels and speaking is the only way to get comfortable is to do it.